And we are talking to our elected officials, I should say, this morning about the government shutdown. And joining us by phone right now is Republican Congressman Lamar Smith, who represents Texas's 21st district. Good morning. How are you?
Just fine, Leslie. Good to be with you and Michael.
Okay, a lot of people very frustrated by this government shutdown. What needs to happen to get things resolved and get the government back up and running?
Right. I don't think there's anybody more frustrated than those of us in the House because quite frankly, we did everything we could to prevent it. It's only the Senate, quite frankly, and the President who refused to sit down and try to find a way out. We think we're on the side of the American people. The Obama administration delayed Obamacare for 1 year for businesses. We think that we ought to delay Obamacare for the rest of the American people for a year. We also think that the senators and members of the House should not get subsidies to help them pay for Obamacare. Apparently the Senate disagrees. So we want to stand on the side of the American people, and it's a real disappointment, quite frankly, that they won't talk. And they'll talk. The administration will talk to the head of Syria and the head of Iran, but they won't talk to the head of the Republicans in the House.
And in respect to the White House, do you feel like the White House is reaching out enough to Congress? Clearly, of course, the Senate is being run by Democrats and Harry Reid and whatnot, but do you feel like the White House has reached out enough to Congress, to the Republicans in the House?
Well, the President has not reached out at all. In fact, every other day he says he won't negotiate, won't talk to the Republicans, and in the days in between, his press secretary says he won't talk and negotiate with the Republicans. That's how you end up with a government that's being closed that we see right now.
Obviously, you're at a standstill right now, so someone has to compromise. What's going to give?
Well, the Republicans' last proposal was to, frankly, sit down with the Democrats in the Senate at a conference committee and try to work out our differences. We don't know whether the Senate is even going to accept that offer or not. I think the American people do want us to sit down, Republicans in the House, Democrats in the Senate, and work out the differences and try to get the government back and open. So we'll see what the Senate says, but we're willing to sit down. We're willing to try to keep the government open. I hope the Senate will be willing to do that as well.
All right, Congressman Lamar Smith, thank you very much for your time this morning. And on the phone now is Congressman Henry Cuellar, a Democrat who represents Texas' 28th district. Congressman, let's begin by talking. The approval rating for Congress by the American people is pretty low right now. Why does it come down to the very end to get things done?
Well, again, this is one thing that if I had one of those red buttons, I would say, why do we not do strategic planning? Why do we not work this from the very beginning? We got 1 year to pass the budget. I'm in the appropriations. We've been working on on this, and guess what? At the very, very end, nobody's talking about the appropriation bills. Nobody's talking about it. We're talking about health care. Health care was debated back in 2010. Nobody's talked about $986 billion is what we ought to be looking at for the budget. Nobody's talking about numbers, which is amazing.
Well, obviously you're at a standstill right now. Do you believe, we keep hearing that Republicans want a compromise, do you believe Democrats will do that?
Well, again, the compromise should be about the budget, the appropriations. How much money do we put on education, transportation, monies that will go to our highways in Barrett County and the surrounding areas? That's the compromise. How much money do we put in? Nobody's talking about that. Healthcare was already debated, because if we start adding other policy riders, what's next? The 1965 Civil Rights Act, or do we put immigration reform on the appropriations? This is an appropriation, situation that we ought to be looking at. Nobody, if you notice, nobody's talked about numbers or the deficit. That's what we ought to be working on right now.
And how would you judge the level of communication happening now between Congress, the House, the Senate, as well as the White House?
Nobody's talking to each other. That's what's amazing. First of all, look, for example, as an example, the Republicans control the House. They have not sat down with us. They have not said, hey, what changes do we look at? The only thing we get is we get a piece of document saying this is the amendment at the last minute. That's what they're doing. Nobody's sitting down with us. Right now they're basically saying, we don't need you Democrats on the House side. We're just going to send some to the Senate. The Senate sends it back over here. Nobody's talking to each other. This is why we have a low approval rating, because we don't communicate and we're not doing our job. Our job should be right now to pass a budget on time, pay our bills on time. That's what we ought to be doing.
All right, Congressman Cuellar, thank you so much for your time this morning.
And we also spoke with Congressman Smith as well. And of course, we will continue to watch this. And if you want to give your elected officials a piece of your mind, we do have a way for you to get in touch with them. Their contact information is available right now on our website, which is news4sa.com. All you have to do is click on Top Stories.